Welcome to the Fundamentals of Fitness. I'm Alison Beresford, performance coach, personal trainer, and founder of AB Performance Training and Coaching. This is a podcast where we strip away the noise, extremes, and surface level advice and return to the science-backed fundamentals that actually build strength, resilience, and long-term performance. Because progress isn't built on intensity alone. It's built on intelligent structure. Today, we're going to talk about something that athletes and high-level coaches rely on constantly, but that most everyday gym goers have never been taught: autoregulation. And if that word sounds technical, don't worry. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly what it means, how athletes use it, and how you can apply it even if you train 3 times a week in a busy gym after work. Because here's the problem. Most people treat training plans and instructions like they're carved in stone. 3 sets of 8, 5 sets of 5, add 2.5 kilos each week. And that sounds structured, which is good. But there's a hidden assumption to these plans. They assume that your body will perform exactly the same every time you walk into the gym. And that assumption simply is not true. Your sleep will change, your stress levels change, your recovery changes, your nutrition changes, your energy availability also changes. Some days you're strong and sharp, other days you're flat, distracted, or fatigued. And if your training plan ignores these realities, you're left doing one of 2 things. You're either forcing numbers that your body isn't ready for, or you're abandoning the plan entirely. Athletes don't do either. They auto-regulate. And that's what we're going to explore today. So pop on those trainers or grab that cup of tea. Let's get going. So let's start with something important. Training plans are not the enemy. Structure is good. Structure prevents randomness. Structure allows progression. But the problem with rigid plans is not the plan itself. It's how literally people follow them. Most programs are written as if recovery will always be perfect. But recovery is never perfect. Think about your last week. Maybe one night you slept well, another night you didn't. Maybe one day work was calm, and another it was chaotic. Maybe you trained hard earlier in the week and accumulated your fatigue. All of that changes your capacity, yet the program written on the page does not change. So your program says 5 sets of 5 at 90 kilos. So you walk into the gym with 2 options. You either force the weight, even though your body's not ready, or you skip the session or feel like you've failed. Neither option is productive. And this is where many people quietly burn out, because they interpret fatigue as weakness, when often it's simply accumulated stress. So in high-level strength environments, coaches expect daily variation. No athlete performs at exactly the same level every session. Even elite powerlifters fluctuate. Some days the bar moves fast, some days it moves slowly. So instead of forcing predetermined numbers, coaches allow the athlete to adjust within a structured framework. That framework is auto-regulation. One of my clients once told me my program says 5 sets of 5 at 85, but I could barely complete the first set. Her instinct was to assume that she'd regressed, but when we looked at the week as a whole, it made more sense. She'd slept badly, work stress was high, and she'd trained legs heavily earlier that week. Her body wasn't weak, it was tired. So we reduced the load slightly, kept the rep scheme, and completed the session productively. The stimulus remained, recovery improved, and the next week she returned much stronger. Let's think about your own training. Have you ever forced a session that clearly felt wrong? Or skipped a session entirely because you felt flat? Those are both signs that the plan and the body were out of sync. Autoregulation sits right in the middle of those 2 extremes. A good program is not a rigid script, it's a framework, and the goal is not to obey the numbers perfectly. The goal is to create the right training stimulus, and sometimes the right stimulus requires adjustment. So what is autoregulation? And autoregulation sounds technical, but the concept is surprisingly simple. Autoregulation means adjusting training variables based on real-time feedback from your body. Instead of asking, what weight did the program tell me to lift? You ask, what level of effort produces the right stimulus today? That subtle shift changes everything because it acknowledges that training happens inside a living, adaptive system, not a spreadsheet. So there are variables that can be adjusted, and this autoregulation can involve adjusting the load, so your weight that you use, the volume, so the number of sets or reps that you do, intensity, so how close you train to failure, exercise variation, and rest intervals. The structure of the session stays the same, but the exact inputs adapt to the day. So rowers often train using perceived exertion or heart rate zones, but even those zones are interpreted relative to your fatigue. If an athlete arrives already fatigued from travel or accumulated training, the session intensity may be adjusted, but the execution changes slightly. The adjustment protects recovery whilst maintaining progress. One of my clients trains 3 times a week, 3 evenings. Some weeks are smooth, other weeks are stressful. And before learning autoregulation, he would approach every session the same way, maximal effort, which meant that on stressful weeks, sessions felt awful. Now he uses a simple approach. If energy feels high, he pushes heavier loads. If energy feels moderate, he maintains load but focuses on great execution. And if energy feels low, he keeps movement quality high but reduces the load slightly. Training never stops, but the pressure to perform identically every session disappears. Your body gives you feedback constantly, through bar speed, through fatigue, through coordination, through focus. The question is, are you listening or are you ignoring those signals because the program says something different? Autoregulation doesn't remove the structure, it just refines it. It allows training to remain productive even when life is imperfect. And life is always imperfect. Now that we understand why rigid plans fail and what autoregulation actually means, the next question becomes, how do athletes actually do this? Because listen to your body sounds nice, but it's vague. And vague advice isn't helpful when you're standing in the gym wondering whether to increase the weight or not. In strength and conditioning, several practical methods have been developed to guide autoregulation, and we'll look at 3 of the most common. And don't worry, you don't need complicated technology to use them. Method 1, RPE, or rate of perceived exertion. And this simply means how hard a set feels. It's usually measured on a scale from 1 to 10, but in strength training, we mostly focus on the upper range. For example, RPE 10 is maximal effort, no reps left in reserve. RPE 9, extremely hard, maybe 1 more rep possible. RPE 8, challenging but controlled. And RPE 7, moderate effort, several reps left in the tank. Think of it as a language for describing effort, because effort matters more than numbers. In powerlifting, programs often prescribe something like work up to a top set of 5 at RPE 8. The program does not prescribe a fixed weight. That's something important. Instead, athletes choose the weight that produces the correct effort level for that day. On a strong day, that might be heavier. On a fatigued day, it might be slightly lighter, but the stimulus stays consistent. And consistency of stimulus is what drives adaptation. One of my clients uses RPE during her squat sessions. Her program calls for 3 sets of 8 at roughly RPE 7 to 8. Some weeks she lifts 70, other weeks she's 75 to 80. Occasionally, she lifts slightly less. But every session still lands at the right effort level, which means training stress stays productive rather than destructive. So in everyday translation for you, you don't need to memorize the scales. Ask yourself a simple question after each set. Could I have done 2 more reps? If yes, you're likely around RPE 8. That's a very effective training zone, hard enough to stimulate progress, but not so hard that your recovery could collapse. Method 2, reps in reverse, or RIR. This method is closely related to RPE, but instead of rating the effort directly, you estimate how many reps you had left before failure. This is called reps in reverse. For example, 0 RIR, complete failure. 1 RIR, 1 rep left. 2 RIR, 2 reps left. 3 RIR, 3 reps left. This method is extremely common in modern strength training research because it allows athletes to train hard without constantly hitting failure. In many professional sport environments, athletes rarely train to complete muscular failure, not because they're lazy, but because failure carries a recovery cost. Instead, they train close to failure, often leaving 1 or 2 reps in reserve. That's enough stimulus to build strength and muscle without accumulating exercise fatigue. I once worked with a client who believed that every set had to end in total exhaustion. Every session was maximal, and eventually every session became miserable. When we introduced the concept of leaving 2 reps in reserve, something interesting happened. Training quality improved and recovery improved, and strength progressed a little bit faster because the nervous system was no longer overwhelmed. So think about what your own training style is. Do you push every set to absolute failure, or do you finish sets feeling like you could have done just a little more? There's nothing heroic about failure if it stops you training consistently. And what could this mean for you? If for most people training for strength or muscle, staying around 1 to 3 reps in reserve is an excellent place to be. It's challenging, but sustainable, and sustainability drives long-term results. Method number 3, velocity-based training. And this one is advanced, but it's very interesting. This is more common in elite sport environments. It's velocity-based training, and it uses sensors to measure bar speed. Why does that matter though? Because bar speed decreases when fatigue increases. So coaches can monitor how quickly the bar moves during a lift. If velocity drops significantly, they stop the set or reduce the load. In Olympic weightlifting programs, maintaining bar speed is crucial. Explosive power matters more than grinding through slow reps. So if bar velocity drops beyond a certain threshold, the set stops. This protects your power output and reduces unnecessary fatigue. But why does this matter even if you don't have technology? And you might not have a velocity sensor, but you can still observe movement quality. If the bar slows dramatically, if technique breaks down, and if coordination disappears, those are signals, and signals that fatigue is rising. Autoregulation means responding to those signals. For everyday trainees, the equivalent is simply noticing when reps slow dramatically, or when technique deteriorates, and when focus disappears. Those are cues, not signs of weakness, just information. So what's the real point of these methods? RPE, RIR, velocity. They're all just tools, different languages describing the same concept, effort. And effort applied intelligently is what drives adaptation, not blind obedience to numbers. So next time you train, try asking yourself, did that set feel like an 8 out of 10 effort? Did I have 2 reps left? Did the bar move smoothly? Those small observations build awareness, and awareness is the foundation of intelligent training. Autoregulation methods allow you to adjust training based on your effort, fatigue, and movement quality, instead of rigid numbers. They help maintain the correct stimulus even when recovery fluctuates, and that's why athletes rely on them, not because they make training easier, because they make training smarter. So if we zoom out for a moment, autoregulation isn't really about RPE scales or reps in reverse. Those are just tools. The real idea behind autoregulation is much simpler. It's this: training should adapt to the body, not the other way around, because your body is not identical every day. Some days you're fresh, some days you're tired, some days you're mentally sharp, and other days you're distracted, stressed, or under-recovered. And pretending those differences don't exist doesn't make you disciplined. It makes your training inefficient. One of the biggest advantages of autoregulation is that it protects consistency. Because whether people follow rigid plans, they often fall into a cycle that looks like this. They force very hard sessions, recovery suffers, fatigue accumulates, then they skip sessions entirely. So training becomes irregular. Autoregulation breaks that cycle. Instead of forcing the maximum every day, you just adjust intensity while still showing up. And showing up repeatedly is what builds your progress. Endurance athletes understand instinctively. Their programming often includes easy sessions, moderate sessions, and hard sessions. But even within those categories, effort adjusts based on fatigue. If an athlete arrives overly fatigued, the session may shift slightly. The goal is not to win every workout. The goal is to maintain training momentum across months and years, because endurance performance is built through accumulated training, not heroic individual days. One of my clients used to approach every gym session like a test. Every lift was maximal, every set was pushed to the limit. And while that felt productive in the moment, the pattern looked like this: 2 strong weeks, then fatigue, then a skip session, then frustration. And when we introduced autoregulation, something interesting happened. Training felt calmer, but progress became more consistent. Because instead of crashing into fatigue, she stayed within a range that allowed recovery. And recovery is where adaptation actually occurs. Another major advantage is injury prevention. Injury rarely appears out of nowhere. More often, it develops gradually through accumulated fatigue, through small technical breakdowns, through pushing when the body is clearly under-recovered. Rigid training plans sometimes ignore those signals, and autoregulation respects them. In strength sports, many injuries occur when athletes force loads that their body isn't ready to handle on that particular day. Maybe sleep was poor. Maybe the nervous system is fatigued. Maybe previous sessions accumulated stress. If the athlete insists on lifting a predetermined number regardless, technique can often break down. Autoregulation reduces that risk. By adjusting the load slightly, the athlete still trains hard, but safely. So what does this mean for you? If your technique suddenly deteriorates during a lift, or a weight that normally feels manageable suddenly feels unstable, that is information, not weakness. Autoregulation allows you to respond to that information intelligently. There's also a psychological benefit that often gets overlooked. Rigid training creates pressure. If every session has a fixed number attached to it, each workout feels like a pass or fail test. And over time, that pressure can erode enjoyment. Training starts to feel like something you have to survive. Autoregulation changes the relationship slightly, because the goal becomes applying the right effort today, not providing something in a spreadsheet. A client once admitted that she felt anxious before strength sessions, not because she disliked training, but because she felt like she had to hit specific numbers. And if she didn't, she believed that she had failed. Once we shifted the focus toward effort rather than numbers, the anxiety reduced. She still trained hard, but the emotional pressure disappeared. And interestingly, when pressure dropped, performance often improved. So how often do you treat workouts like exams? When success means hitting the number written on the page, and anything less feels like failure. Because training shouldn't feel like that. Training should feel like a process. So if we look at the long game, and if we look at athletes who stay healthy and strong for years, one thing stands out. They don't train rigidly, they train intelligently. They adjust based on feedback, and they recognize fatigue signals. They respect recovery, and they keep moving forward. Autoregulation supports that long game because it allows training to remain productive even when life is imperfect. And life is always imperfect. In motorsport, drivers often arrive at training sessions after long travel days, sim work, media obligations, and intense cognitive demands. A good performance coach doesn't ignore that fatigue. They'll adjust the session because the goal isn't to prove toughness. The goal is to maintain performance across an entire season. And the same principle applies to you. Your training should support your life, not compete with it. Autoregulation improves training because it protects recovery, it maintains consistency, and it reduces injury risk. It lowers psychological pressure and it supports long-term adaptation. It allows you to train hard when the body is ready and intelligently when it isn't. And that balance is what sustains progress. And autoregulation isn't about lowering standards, it's about raising awareness. Because the best athletes in the world don't ignore feedback from their bodies, they use it. And you can do the same. Next time you walk into the gym, don't just look at the numbers on the program. Pay attention to effort, to fatigue, to movement quality. Those signals are information. And when you learn how to use them, training becomes not just harder, but smarter. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this episode has helped you think differently about how you train, share it with someone who believes that every workout has to be maximal to be effective. And if you're building long-term strength and performance, not just chasing random workouts, make sure you're following the fundamentals of fitness so you don't miss what's coming next. Next time, we're going to explore the adaptation curve and why your body resists change more than you might expect it. Until then, train with structure, recover with intention, and build something that lasts. I'll catch you next week.